that. Getting nervous here for some reason. There it is. Okay, good. That looks good. Welcome, Igniters. Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Quevedo, and today we're going to speak with Billie Groom. But before we bring her on, why don't we learn a little more about Billie?
Mahatma Gandhi once wrote, "There is a regular science of dog keeping which the people in the West have formulated and perfected. We should learn from them and devise measures for the solution of our own problem." And Billie Groom has taken that dog keeping science to the next level. She has taken great strides and has saved thousands of lives and suffering of dogs worldwide through her proven method of Canine Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, also known as CCBT. A scientifically proven methodology designed to help humans recognize pre-established thought patterns, respect emotions, and harness cognitive abilities of dogs they encounter. Her journey in dog welfare began 30 years ago, and it is still gaining momentum into a global education and activist movement. Yet the vastness of Billie Groom's activities and accomplishments touch a wide spectrum of expertise in areas other than canine behavior. She is a celebrated award-winning author and screenplay writer, an expert boxing coach, a respected entrepreneur, an authority on canine cognitive behavioral therapy, a lauded animal rights advocate, and now an honored guest on Ignite Your Essence TV talk show. Billie Groom, welcome.
Now, here we go. Hello, Igniters. So today, as we mentioned before, we're going to have Billie Groom. And Billie, I'm going to pull you up here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm so happy that you're here too. You're all the way from Canada. And as you know, we're on a live streaming show and we really wanted to talk with you and discuss basically your work. Now, we covered a little bit about your origin story, but mostly that just surrounded around your work. But what brought this passion of really helping with cognitive behavior of dogs, but also with animals themselves? Could you share with us a little more about that, Billie?
It was an unintentional journey. My learning journey and my career path was completely unintentional. It started out over 30 years ago, wanting to just, like a lot of people, they love dogs and they want to foster dogs. And that's what I did. And I took in some dogs that some of the local shelters, I was on the West Coast in British Columbia, and they were having difficulties with these dogs and wanted to take them in, and really didn't think much of it, but it was just something I really enjoyed doing. Then I met a guy from Texas, and he had a dog. I had a couple dogs, and we went down to Texas in a renovated bus, which was not that.
Did you renovate it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess he did. Yeah, it was a makeshift renovated bus. It was not as romantic as it sounds. And we picked up dogs on the way. And to fast forward the story, we did have a unintentional rescue service or a rescue 24 acres in North Carolina. So you learn a lot about dogs when you're doing that. And I only took in, I shouldn't say only took in, it just happened that there were all over the age of 6 months. And that's a very important part when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy for dogs. I only work with dogs over 6 months of age. So from there, we split. I went up to Toronto. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started really working with dogs. I opened a very successful dog daycare long before it was popular, long before internet and before it was trendy. Dog walking daycare. Worked for the zoo, which I'm embarrassed of now because I can't say I'm a huge fan of zoos, but you know, they have their purpose, I suppose. And I did learn from the veterinarians there who worked at the zoo about animal behavior and about why animals do certain behaviors and why they feel certain ways and change, why they might decide not to eat or why they might decide, you know, just to change their behavior. And I found myself really interested in that. And I brought it back over to dogs, started working with more difficult dogs, ones with more challenging backgrounds and ones that the rescue organizations were finding challenging. Took in a couple from the Toronto Humane Society, one in particular, and they awarded me, they recognized me for my work. I was very very proud of that. But I also wondered what I was doing so differently. Why were other people struggling with this? And why were rescue organizations struggling in that adolescent stage, which in the dog world is sort of the, around the 7, 8 months to about 2 years, somewhere in there is often called the adolescent stage.
Mhm.
And that's a time where everybody perhaps has done everything perfectly with their puppy. All their puppy training went well, and then they hit that adolescent stage and everything goes out the window, and they don't really understand why the dog's behavior has changed, why what was working before is no longer working. And that just really started to intrigue me. So I started to take in more dogs and learn. And I learned from the dogs. I never intended to be a behaviorist. I never intended to learn about dog training, which I didn't do formally. What I wanted to do was decrease euthanasia and increase successful surrenders.
I
Or
love
excuse me,
that.
increase successful adoptions, decrease surrenders, obviously.
Right.
So, excuse me, I just got a frog in my throat. So that's how it started. And from there, I just continued to learn about what I was doing.
Mhm.
And it was successful. I didn't know why it was successful. I don't know how long you want me to go on here on this.
No,
No.
I think the story is really good, and I find it fascinating when you're talking about Billy about the 6-month adolescent phase.
Right.
For example, our first dog was a puppy from a breeder, and it always amazed me when I was researching breeds for 2 years, and I was meeting with all kinds of breeders and then, essentially trainers because I wanted to take puppy class before we got a puppy. And the one thing that I noticed is that the pricing went down the older the dog got. And then I realized that when there were rescues, because there were friends that were giving me a hard time, and they were saying, "Hey, you got to get a rescue," but I knew nothing about dogs. And I had always been raised thinking, oh, the older the dog is, all kinds of weird things happen at that 6-month stage. And yet you're showing me that you really were able to be up for that challenge and to help dogs with their transition. And then your exploration was like, hey, why am I doing things differently? Is this where so cognitively you knew something was different, right? You were aware of certain things, but is this the springing board as to why you went deeper into the science of the neuroscience of animal behavior and such? I know you said you didn't like zoos as much, but they do talk about animal behavior. How did that bridge happen?
I think I started to realize that what I was doing was different than what was mainstream. And when dog training became popular and people were talking about operant conditioning and positive reinforcement training and different trainers doing things differently, I started to look into what they do and why it worked or didn't work. And I started to talk to psychologists and veterinarians, try to understand what I was doing that was different and why it was working with dogs over 6 months when other methods didn't. And I've always really enjoyed psychology. Excuse me, sorry again. I've always really enjoyed psychology and studying it. So what I did was I approached it that way. And so it wasn't until later that I realized that my methodology actually follows the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's the
Oh,
same with mainstream dog training. It follows the principles of conditioning methods. So both conditioning methods and cognitive behavioral therapy are both scientifically proven methodologies for people.
yeah,
And
I
they're
think that's important to point out, and thank you for doing that, because there are a lot of theories out there, but your technique really is supported by science. And that's one of the things that why we were so excited to have you on Ignite Your Essence, because of the fact that you've done the groundwork, you understand how the science works, but also you have a track record of really helping dogs. I hate to use the term rehabilitation, so please correct me if there's a different word, but dogs with behavioral issues that everybody thinks is the fault of the dog. Oftentimes, though, is the problem the dog's fault, or what is it? I mean, we hear, well, you got to understand them, but where do we start?
That's a really good question because there's a lot of studies done on dog and dog behavior and scientific studies. and they're trying to reach the cognitive side of the brain. They're trying to understand dog cognition, how they think, how they feel. And they'll study the adolescent stage, yet they'll be using techniques that are grounded in operant conditioning.
Oh,
So they're
conflicting.
It is. It's interesting because I study these studies that they're doing, and I do talk to scientists, and I am involved in some of the upcoming projects, and I find them, or the studies, and I find them really interesting because in order they're trying to learn what I already do, and I'm trying to get proven what I do in smaller segments of studies. So we do know, veterinarians know, that dogs do have a side of their brain that thinks cognitively, a certain percentage of their brain. So they do have, even puppies do, but that develops as they hit that adolescent stage and they start to use their cognitive skills differently, just like a child from 3 to 4 years old, for example. And it was a child psychologist actually that got a hold of me and really was interested in talking to me about this, on how, for example, a 3-year-old child, you can start teaching them that sharing is good, that it's good to share. And they start to learn, so if I take some of my crayons over to my sister, then my parents love me and my mom loves me, and good things happen, rewards called in the dog world. And so they really want to do that, and they like learning. And then they get 4 years old and they start thinking, do I
Independence.
want to share? I don't share. Can they make
Right.
me share? Do I have any options? Can I share some of my crayons, not all my crayons? And that's what you're starting to get with the dogs in at that adolescent stage, even if they've had a very good upbringing from puppyhood. So we need to work with that, and we need to harness those cognitive skills. And that's what I've learned how to do. If it's a dog from the street, and I use the term street in an umbrella term, so that really could be from a basement, it could be from anywhere, but an unconventional upbringing, and
Okay.
perhaps survival on their own or within a different environment than a good family home.
Okay. Understood.
So they are using their cognitive skills to stay alive. So they have learned what works for them. They've learned what they need to do to achieve their goal, and that's all cognition. So if we bring them into our home and we just revert right back to methods that teach right from wrong, and I should probably backtrack here a bit. When I was learning, as I went through my process and I started to learn, and I started to talk to different psychologists and veterinarians, I learned, I guess I would say I knew to a certain extent the same as anyone would. I mean, some people have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy. They might be using it for themselves to break a bad habit, or in their work environment, or their child at school. And same with operant conditioning. Most people naturally do it. So operant conditioning, you're using reinforcements to encourage wanted behavior.
Is that more of a transactional relationship? Like, if you do this, you'll get this,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly.
So if the desires change, like you said, the dogs get a little older, like humans do, they start seeing more options. They're like, well, how come
Yeah, yeah.
if I do this, will I get something else? Or do I want that right now? So I could see why. I know exactly what you're talking about, that type of training, because I remember seeing a trainer, like, when I took the puppy class before the puppy, and somebody raised their hand and they said, do I have to be a walking deli? Because they were like, oh yeah, you just keep on giving them treats and shove treats. And we were also told that dogs are greedy. And so if you just keep on shoving things, they're going to want more and more. But then these people started to have these issues with their dogs because they're like, hey, I didn't have a treat with me and I couldn't get my dog to come. And so my dog almost got hit by a car or something like that.
Right. And that's
Right.
when they say to just increase the value of the reward. But once you start doing that, really what should go off in your head is you need to switch over to CCBT.
Right. And I'm
Right?
sure
It's
a
just
lot of
easier
treat
and it makes more
makers.
sense. So it
Yeah.
does work at puppyhood, operant conditioning. Absolutely. Because you're starting with a clean slate. They're learning right from wrong. That's how operant conditioning is designed. And this isn't just in the dog world. This is conditioning methods are designed to teach right from wrong.
Okay.
And to use associative techniques or desensitization to change behavior. and to
Now,
encourage wanted behavior and discourage unwanted behavior. Whereas cognitive behavioral therapy works off a totally different platform. So it's not that one is better than the other.
mhm,
It's that dogs go through different stages and they
okay.
learn differently and they have different personalities. So it's important to know both.
So when
And
it's applied, it's the timing of the application, like you're saying, or
yeah, I mean, puppies commonly, yeah, that's why I only work with dogs over 6 months, because puppies commonly
are
work
food
well with
motivated?
operant conditioning. You should use operant
They want
conditioning.
the squeaky toy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basic and it works. It's also human nature. It's human
Mm,
nature to
mhm,
reward wanted behavior and to discourage in some manner or another, whether it's there's terms now and there's different ways of doing it, and all trainers do it differently.
mhm.
Um,
We see that with parenting
Positive
too.
punishment and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So it's not that it's negative or positive. That's a big discussion in dog training world, whether it's an appropriate technique or not. Once you start getting into CCBT, you don't even have to have that discussion, because we don't use positive and negative reinforcements, whether they're,
Ah.
it's just not even there. It's not the platform. It doesn't work off that platform or principles.
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to see the comparison here, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Billy. But when we see with human parents, okay, when they have their children, and that works really well. Hey, I'm going to give you your candy or your toy or dessert or your or whatever, and then they become the teenage years, which is like 6 years old for dogs, right? And then teenagers like, you can't buy me, and then all of a sudden all this thing can then turmoil. And I've noticed that with my friends, they have seen therapists for their kids who are cognitive behaviorists, so I can see how like the benefit also transitions for dogs as well. Let's
Yes.
talk about rescue dogs. Now, you were talking about how uh, different applications at different times for street dogs, and that is a term, folks, that Billie Groom, if you're just popping in, Billie was talking about the different applications for her CCBT training, which is cognitive canine behavior therapy. And
Canine
so
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Canine cognitive behavioral therapy. Thank you. You may have to correct me a couple times
That's
when
okay.
it comes to
It's
that
a mouthful.
alphabet, the acronym. Sometimes I get them jumbled up, so please forgive me.
No problem.
So what you're talking about here is that when those moments happen, that's when you apply. But a lot of people are talking about rescue dogs, and and I think about Monty Roberts. Do you remember him? He was known as the horse whisperer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he showed right away out there in Nevada and with Mustangs out in the wild, he would do
Right.
a technique, a cognitive therapy, behavioral treatment therapy called join up.
Yeah.
And he would kind of shadow behaviors of the horse. And then the horse would start going, oh, okay. And people were amazed. They didn't believe him. And then they were amazed because by making these little bit of cognitive changes, the horses were calmed down. They were going into trailers when they never did. And all these things out in the open, not in a closed environment. And then you're talking about street dogs. Have you applied this cognitive behavioral or canine cognitive behavioral therapy with street dogs to get them to trust you so that you can help them or help people rescue them? Has that been applied?
Yes, hundreds of them. I've had hundreds of rescue dogs in my care.
So
And I
walk
also
us through how
I
that
work with
works.
about 100 to 200 clients a year for 3 decades. And a
Okay.
lot of them have rescue dogs, not all of them. A lot of them are very dog experienced and dog knowledgeable. I have veterinarians for clients. So it's not a matter of being better, it's a matter of the method. The method
Ah,
is proven to work with these dogs because it changes perception to change behavior. So it's
okay.
not all about what you brought up is a very good point, that you need to have a different bond. You have a different bond with these dogs than you would with a lot of my clients will say that to me. It's something that they say fairly early as we're working together. They'll say, I just feel like my dog thinks of me differently. We have a different bond. And they were bonded with their dog before. So, a lot of them, it's not that they just got their dog yesterday and we're working together. A lot of them are are very bonded with their dog and they love their dog and their dog loves them, but it's a different, getting back to that sort of 15-year-old child, you need to bond with them differently and approach them differently and allow them, recognize what's important to them, recognize their emotional intelligence, provide them with the ability to make decisions, and provide them with the ability to decide for themselves that they can change their behavior without anything horrible happening. So you need to address the reason for the behavior, not just the behavior. And this has become very popular in the dog world now. There's a lot of very influential organizations and very influential trainers talking about this. They're talking about proactive prevention. They're talking about that human-animal bond and relating it and harnessing that emotional intelligence that dogs already have. You can't do that with conditioning methods. You can have a bond. You can fall in love with you can be nice, you can do, but the platform itself is not intended to do that. The principles, the way the formula works with operant conditioning or different conditioning methods as well. I am familiar as well with counter conditioning, classical conditioning, and they do address behavioral issues such as aggression and anxiety through association and desensitization.
Okay.
Not the same as CCBT. So if you're talking about all this and this is making sense to you and there's these, like I said, organizations and very influential people talking this way and their mindset is right. Their mindset is exactly there, but then they go back to operant conditioning when they actually apply it as a therapy or as a rehabilitation or just to integrate dogs into the home. You know, the first 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. It's very different with the way I do it. I don't, people have patience. They want to help. They want to bring these dogs into their homes. They want to help them. But if they don't have productive patience, they have to have something to do that they see progress. They feel it. They feel a different bond. They feel that they have the ability to calmly teach these dogs, but also learn from them and learn what's important to them and get that bond and that relationship and bring them into their life so that they can go camping and bring them to their kids' baseball games and do these things. This is what CCBT is intended to do. It's not intended to teach right from wrong on a clean platform. So that's why it works particularly well with dogs that have preconceived thought patterns. Their emotions are driven by experiences. That is exactly what it's meant to do. So my formula, Upward Dogology, takes that and applies it to dogs. So I've learned how to do that with dogs.
Their emotions are driven by experiences. And that's an observation that I've never heard of. So clearly that comes from your type of technique of the cognitive therapy.
Well, they're doing things
Okay.
for a reason.
Okay,
right?
so now we know you're an expert. You said it all. You have all those things. Let's get into the details here, Billie. We want people who can have practical knowledge because you sounded very encouraging. You said, "Hey, you can help them, but there's certain ways." And so clearly there's a shift in the mindset of the owner. And I want to delve in deeper on this. Now we get to get into the fun part. So all of you watching right now, we have Billie Groom, and we are talking about upward dogology, which is a scientifically proven technique of how to help dogs at the stages of their development in order for you to work in a symbiotic environment and to live peacefully and have your dogs happy. So, Billie, don't go away. We're going to have a commercial break, and I'd like to kind of delve in deeply, and we're going to talk about practicality and how we already know you're the expert, but now we get to see Billie sing. Now we get to see why people from all over the world go to see Billie Groom, either personally or throughout Zoom, because we're international now, folks, and she's internationally renowned. We're going to find out why they're so drawn to her. So don't go away, Billie, and we're going to take you back there. I promise, folks, you are here, of course, on Ignite Your Essence. And we're so thankful to have you. But we want to share with you what our sponsor has mentioned. Well, I want you to learn a little more as to why we're here. But more importantly, I want you to listen to our commercial break so you get to understand what we're also up to.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune page. Here you will find original news programming, exclusive digital events, and shows that are directly from the community. At the Los Angeles Tribune, we believe in giving a voice to the voiceless. We are proud to be the only national brand to empower everyday people to make a difference. Since 1886, our reputation has been built on truth and responsibility. Thank you for watching and making a difference.
For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
We seem to have lost our host. So I can tell you about my little dog back there.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was muted. We're waiting for Michelle to come back. I was just talking along and I just realized I was muted. So thank you so much for joining us, Billie. I love
I was going to tell everyone about my dog back there. It's my little Mexican street dog.
Our love for our technical difficulty. Yeah. So Michelle was talking about just giving us some practical tips. I know I'm a grand fur baby. I have a fur baby a rat terrier who has so much energy. Loves getting on the couches and the beds and so forth. And I'm not that type of person about, reward and treats. So can you give me or give our audience some practicality, some tips of how, when a dog is almost not misbehaving, but guess that's us as pet owners think that way, right? Oh, he's bad or he's doing something good. But with cognitive behavioral, how can us as pet owners change our mindset? Can you give us some tips and some steps regarding that?
That's interesting that you say that, because it is a really difficult thing for people to do, because when they start asking questions that can be answered by operant conditioning. So for example, what reward would you use, or what negative reinforcement? Those are all operant conditioning or conditioning methods. So you just simply can't answer them when you're in the CCBT platform. As far as rules, they just allow people to have their own. I have my dog on the bed and couch and things like that. So you're building platform skills. And when you build the platform skills, that's what changes the dog's perception of you and your ability to manage. And then you take these platform skills and you apply them creatively to address different issues if you have problems. Although having said that, a lot of times when I work with my clients and we're building those platform skills, which could take 4 days to a week, depending on the dog. The platform skills are different depending on the dog's personality, what's important to the dog's history, what my client's goals are. And we develop these platform skills and they apply them and they see these changes occur. They provide me with feedback. And what's so cool is the feedback that they give, because it's all nothing to do what they actually hired me for. But you can see the dog change and think, and they can actually see the dog's cognitive skills click in and they learn to read their dog better. And that is so important because it's not all about teaching the dog. It's about learning what's important to them, applying that creatively, taking it. So traditional trainers using operant conditioning or other forms of conditioning can often give, when your dog does this, do this, or when your dog does that, do that. But because that's not the way, not even just CCBT, but cognitive behavioral therapy is designed, it's not, my clients learn how to create and establish these platform skills and then how to apply it. And that's also something that you're hearing a lot in the dog world as well. People are saying you can't just focus on the negative. You have to build platform skills. That is CCBT, but they're trying to do it while staying in the operant conditioning platform. They need to leave that platform and learn CCBT in order to effectively do that. And that's where it gets a little, for me, it's great because I know how to do it. And my clients have a great time. We have a great time.
Wow, that's fantastic. Hi.
It's
Oh
so
my
fun.
goodness.
I love it. It's great. And my clients will start saying to me, oh, I know what to do. I know what Billie's going to say. I can take this and do this. It's the same as anything else when you learn how to relate to a person or how to relate to your child in a certain stage. And then once you kind of get it, it just goes. And that's what I help people do quickly, because we don't want people to surrender their dog. We don't want people to euthanize their dog. We don't want people to give up, and they don't want to. And we need people to be able to feel comfortable adopting a dog over the age of 6 months, which gets back to your initial story there, Michelle, about how you thought it might be easier to adopt a puppy. But if it's standard across the board, what to do in the first 3 days, a week, 10 days, that makes a lot of difference when you're bringing these dogs into your home. The chances of a successful adoption go up dramatically. And I just love that.
I totally believe that. In fact, and thank you, live television. I'm back. Thank you so much, Michelle Wilson, who, by the way, is our Wednesday host in the mornings at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Guys, you got to check out her interview. She's fantastic. And Billie, I know you've seen hers.
Yeah,
So
she's
going
great.
back to what you're saying, it's
Yes.
really fascinating because we now have what you call a rescue dog. So a dog who we were told by an adoption agency was surrendered. And she was fine. We're like, oh, she's so perfect. She's lovely and everything. And then something happened that they called resource guarding, and she got crazy. And you could see in her eyes, and she didn't want to be there. Like, she was really like scared. And I didn't know what to do. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I have a friend who is a dog trainer who has been studying cognitive behavioral therapy, certainly not at the level that you are, Billie, but she was the closest resource that we ever had. And for her to kind of start teaching us how dogs think, I was like, oh my goodness, she reminded me of a lecture I saw with Temple Grandin, who, by the way, folks, if you don't know who Dr. Temple Grandin is, you got to look her up. They even did a movie on her. She has profound autism, and yet she is the foremost authority on cognitive behavioral therapy of cattle, for example, and
Yes.
such. And she's opened the world to us about how animals think differently. And I know I want to put emphasis on there. How different do animals think, and how can we help them shift? Because with the little help that we got with our dog, she's made a huge difference of just us understanding that there's a cognitive development here. Could you speak to that, please, Billie?
Well, I don't know what your trainer did exactly.
No.
I don't know if it's more. So there are a lot of trainers, like I said. You can do canine enrichment, for example, and you're reaching the cognitive side of the brain. Agility, you're reaching the cognitive side of the brain. You're using cognitive skills, scent detection. They're all using cognitive skills. So the formula I have adheres to CCB, or adheres to cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't know if your trainer
Yeah,
Sort of
I
depends.
don't want you to
Sure.
speak to what you don't know, but could you
No,
kind of
I
give us
don't,
an
but I
idea
think the
why it
mindset is
works?
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the mindset is right where I'm guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but she probably was saying you can't just tell your dog that it's wrong to guard that bone. Because in your dog's mind, there's a reason why they have to guard that. So we have to build the skills that change their perception for the need to guard that bone.
Mm,
And so it's
okay.
not a matter of I'm going to get this bone no matter what, or I'm going to, give them crap if they growl or lunge. You just have to start completely separately.
Yes,
And
in
to me,
fact, I'll give you an example, and maybe you can tell
sure.
us what the science is. So, what she did is not even go there first. She
Right.
said, your dog doesn't have any self-esteem. She's been told no a lot, and she's confused. And she said, why don't we help to encourage her and build self-esteem? And so we went for a walk, as many people tell us to do. And we just asked her things. Hey, can you jump on this rock? And she did. And we're like, yes, that's really good. And then and it was really funny because the more self-esteem she had, the better. Now, clearly there's things that go on. But what amazed me is, like you said, is that they think differently. Let's dissect that. Let's get there. You can rescue dogs. You don't have to surrender dogs that have been surrendered. You can actually live a great life. Can you speak to that? Can you speak to why people don't have to rethink about a lot of dogs? That you can actually work with them who may have some issues of trust. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm still stuck back on I think it's great what your trainer did. I think that's great. It's not exactly what I do. It is they're using some, games, and I don't know if it's games, but skill sets. You need a transferable skill. That's an element with CCBT is you need a transferable skill set
Oh,
as
okay.
opposed to
So
relying on.
what would you do if you were in that situation? I would love to hear that.
Well, I can't really train but
Oh, okay.
yeah, I can, because then people will run and try it and it won't work because it wouldn't be necessarily what
I'm
what
just
it's
trying to
used
let
for.
our viewers kind of know
Yeah.
what is Billie about, can you
Yeah,
can you
but
give
the
us a little
idea of
taste?
what she did is you do take it separately and you build skills at other times where the dog is not stressed. And those skills
Oh, okay.
allow the dog to learn um, that what's important to them.
Okay.
So she didn't necessarily have a skill set that she could bring back to the bone. But I think what
Mhm.
happened with your dog is the lower level activities and catching that cognitive side of the brain and changing your dog's perception of you and your ability to understand what's important and to relate. That may have unto itself changed the perception enough that it decreased the resource guarding. Sometimes it doesn't. So the skills I use
You're so
would
right.
have a transferable element about them, which is commonly command based, but the commands are taught differently than puppy. And they're taught where they're reaching that same cognitive side of the brain that is making decisions. We're doing that at positive decision times and applying it to not exactly the decisions that we want times. So
Got it.
so what she did, and as I said earlier in this talk, is that sometimes you can just do the basics of reaching the cognitive side of the brain, and it actually is effective and does change perception and then does address the issues. Other times we've built platform skills that reach the cognitive side of the brain, and we take those and we creatively apply them. So if it didn't address your resource guarding at that initial level, we would have skill sets that we would apply at increasingly difficult situations to bridge that gap
Mhm.
between where we're at and our resource guarding. And that's how CBT works.
I love this. Are you getting this, viewers? Did you hear how she broke it down? Billie was not going to commit because she wanted to get to know my dog personally. And I don't know
Yes,
about you,
I
but
do
I
feel
don't
that
want a
way.
cookie cutter approach,
Yeah,
especially since
not.
we have personal relationships with our pets and we want to have deeper relationships with our pets.
And
And
this
to
is what
have
I was saying
somebody
about
like
the
you,
feedback. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, sorry.
Oh,
But
no, go
it
ahead.
is just really interesting because the feedback that I get from my clients, and this is one of the principles of CBT, is that the feedback then determines the next step. So I know, so when I'm working with my clients, I'm not teaching them CBT. I'm not teaching them the formula. I'm applying it to their specific dog and situation. So I will give them exercises to do, or we'll decide on them together based on their dog. And then based on that feedback, I then can present them with the next step and what they should do based on what the dog does. And that's why I love it. That's why I absolutely love CBT, because it's so creative and I love hearing it. It's a little bit like a nutritionist who might start out finding out about what their clients' eating habits are, what their exercise habits are, what their goals are. And then based on that, giving some fairly generic, but really to do specific to the person, what information they've provided. But it's going to go along the lines of fewer calories and more exercise. Probably, right?
Probably.
I'm not
Yeah.
a nutritionist, but there's going to be more fruit and vegetables and less chocolate bars and potato chips somewhere in there, right? But how they do that exactly with that person sort of depends. And then that person is going to come back with information on, I'm sleeping better, my skin is better, my nails are stronger. But what they really want to do is lose 20 pounds. But those changes tell that nutritionist something. Those changes tell that nutritionist, oh, okay, we need to continue in this direction, or do this, or apply this, and this is where we're going to go. And then the 20 pounds is lost quicker than if they had just done a generic. The other thing I just want to bring up that's very interesting about using that healthy living or nutrition weight loss is you can compare it, because operant conditioning would be teaching people that an apple is healthier than a bag of potato chips, and that an apple has fewer calories. And then you would give them a weekly plan. And in that weekly eating plan, if they do it for the week, they might get 25 points towards their food as a reward for doing it for the next week. So then they get their 25 points. When people just simply don't know about healthy eating and healthy lifestyle, that can be effective. But when it is, for example, an eating disorder or stress, something like that, they know that apple is what they should be eating, as opposed to that bag of potato chips. They know that. And they know that it's wrong. And they know what they need to do. But they need to look inside themselves, and they need to understand why they're doing it. And they need to address the reason why they're doing it, so that they make that decision themselves, not based on the 25 credits at the end of the week, but based on understanding why they're doing it, making better choices. And then once they make that better choice, they realize, I feel healthier. I'm sleeping better. I look better. And so they decide on their own to do that, because they don't need that bag of potato chips anymore. That's CBT. So you can see it's the same problem, essentially. They both want to change their eating habits. They both want to get healthy, but a different method might work for different people depending on the reason why.
That is a great comparison. And what's interesting, though, also, is how is it the dog, though? I guess the thing that pops up in my head. So the dog has the issue. So is it the dog that goes, when you give him the right program, the right working with, obviously it's training the people and the dog, we're understanding how the dog thinks. But does the dog say finally, oh, I don't need to guard my bones, say, for instance, or I don't need to freak out every time I hear noises. Is so you finally present something to them after designing this program all around them. In such a pleasing way, it seems.
Their brain clicks over. People feel it in their brain. People feel it in their dog's brain. They can see it. And they
So
do it
human
themselves.
mindset, we call that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Conversations, we tend to go, uh, so in human mindset, that's called the breakthrough, right?
Mhm.
So and we don't breakthrough doesn't mean breaking, folks. We don't want to break animals.
No,
We don't want to break their spirit.
no.
But humans, it's that breakthrough point where the mind shifts. And you're saying that you help them with those breakthrough points. Is that correct? Did I get that correctly? Or
Yes. Yes.
and what does
So,
that look like a lot of times? Can you give us some examples?
oh, my clients will just say really cool things. They'll be applying the exercises that are specific to their dog and adapting the exercises and going along. And you just could have something like someone may have a dog that has anxiety, high anxiety. It works really well for anxiety. And let's say their dog doesn't pee, urinate, pee on a walk, which is maybe common. It can be common for dogs with anxiety where they won't pee on a walk. Now, people don't hire me because their dog doesn't pee on a walk, but they might say to me, oh my God, like 2 days later, my dog is starting to pee on a walk. Great. Now I know that that client is doing the exercises right because the dog is not in a panic all the time. The brain has come back relaxed enough and is choosing to pee on the walk. We didn't talk about peeing on the walk. It wasn't necessarily a goal, but something like that. Or they see a change in their dog. There's lots of things that they might say. They might say, oh, my dog's following me more around the house or less around the house or looking at me more. And it's not a look with a distraction or a treat or a command, look at me command. It's just the dog is choosing to do that. And these are signals that the dog's making decisions and changing the way that they're thinking and taking that time to just reset. It would be when people say just take 3 deep breaths before you make a decision, so that you're just, oh, you're starting to panic about something. And professionals, actually, I saw it on one of your shows. I can't remember which guest it was, but she was talking about just take those 3 deep breaths. And I'm thinking
Yes.
that's what I do for dogs is I bring back their brain. It's not that difficult. It's quite simple. And then and my clients will say that they see their dog stop, like kind of do and then that's when the dog's processing. And that's what we want. We want that dog to process and think and make those better decisions instead of making them for them. So like I said, you'll hear a lot in the dog world now where they're saying, oh, we're giving dogs options. They can either go lay on their bed or they can go over here and get a treat. That's not the same thing. That's not, you might be solving your problem where your dog's no longer losing his mind barking out the front window, but it's different than when you work with your dog at the window, allowing him to remain there, getting that brain clicked over, and then they make decisions. And people find it very hard to process this until they see it. So you really, I have 7,000 client videos and I'm looking to share it, but it's a matter of learning it as a whole, applying it and
Yeah,
seeing it. And
totally.
they see it in their dogs all the time. It's the most magnificent thing. I love it.
I love that because they can get those breakthroughs. They can get that knowledge right away, and then they get that customization of having you analyze things. And so there's this wealth of catalog that you have with Upward
Yeah,
Dogology
yeah,
of canine cognitive behavioral therapy. But then there's the expert behind it. We have a lot of the way I think about it, if we're going on the nutrition analogy again,
sure.
I think of supplements. There's a ton of supplements. We all know that there's vitamin C can help you. We all know that certain things, but the combinations of that, we don't know how to do that. Sometimes we can have too much of something and not enough of something else. And so to have somebody like you, and then you said something that struck me, that just struck me like to my core, Billie. You said it's not that hard. But it is hard for a lot of us animal owners because we don't know how they think and we don't know how to make those shifts. So it's such an honor to talk to you, somebody who can go straight to the bone and say, yes, this is what you can do. Let's learn about what's going on. Let's work with them instead of distracting, because a lot of those techniques seem
Yeah.
like distracting to me.
They
And
are.
sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but I don't really like a 50-50 type of, I like to lessen my odds. And by
Yeah.
doing that is these methods that you're talking about. It's just fascinating. I don't know about you guys, but you, the viewers, I'm gobsmacked about this. Not only is it profound how you compared the importance of what you teach, but also the fact that when you get the right knowledge, and this is with everything, when you get the right knowledge at the right time, the shift happens effortlessly. Is that what I'm getting from you, Billie?
Yes. And my clients will say to me all the time, why is this not out there, or why it just happened? And I'm not saying every single client finds success quickly, because it's like any rehabilitation or anything. Plus, I have the added element of teaching it to the people to teach their dog. And to me, that's so important, because it really needs that. It's so bonding. I just strongly feel, and people love doing it, and they love that bond. And I like working with the people, but there is that added element. And then there's everybody's, there's a lot of different factors, the same as when you're rehabilitating humans as well, or working with humans. But they do commonly just, why isn't this out there? And it makes so much sense. And it makes sense because it makes sense to the dog. It's just very logical to the dog. I think when you start talking a lot about distraction and avoidance, to me, that's just a red flag that they need to incorporate CCBT in there, because if they start to rely and start making avoidance and distraction techniques, they're not techniques. They, yes, you have to have a distance. No, you cannot be flooding. You want to do it at the pace of the dog. But most of my clients have been told they just have to avoid, or they just have to cope with their dog's anxiety.
Yeah.
Or they just have to manage
I
situations.
hear that from trainers too.
Yeah.
That's the
and
advice
it's
we
not
get all the
techniques.
time.
They're being told that these are techniques, and it's simply because mainstream dog training doesn't have the solutions. And that's because they're using operant conditioning, and operant conditioning is not intended to address these behaviors. And
As the
so
brain
they
gets more
make-
advanced, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And so they've just made these other like avoidance and stuff as acceptable, and there's no need for it. If we want to really understand dogs and work with them, we have to harness that cognitive side of the brain.
Wow. So,
And
Billie, this is so beautiful what you're saying. I mean, and it really is, because I feel that you're really going to add even more so to the dialogue that's so needed about working with dogs and also animals. We have a rescue efforts also, and I want to go into detail with that. But before that, I'd like to ask if you can answer one of the questions from one of our viewers. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Laura Ibarra had asked a question. Is it a myth that behavior will depend on the breeds of dogs?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't approach based on breed
Whoa, really?
at all. So
Okay,
it's
I got to
based
hear this.
totally on I'll ask a lot of questions, and sometimes there's a lot of times I don't know the breed of the dog, especially because I do a lot on Zoom. And then partway through a session, I might guess just for fun, see fun, because they do have particular, but it's not that I wouldn't, it has to be on the personality and the reason why a dog's doing a behavior, which is not individual to breed.
Oh,
So
okay.
any dog, any breed can do any behavior for any reason, just like people.
That is
But
fascinating.
if you take something like a dog that is just prone to doing jobs such as herding, right? The
Yeah.
reason why they might be nipping at the ankles might be different than a dog that's doing it out of fear, which may be something more common in something like a Chihuahua. But as soon as you say that, the next thing I know, I'm working with a border collie that is nipping because of fear, right? So it's really not to do with breed at all.
Mhm. Wow.
I
That's
don't.
fascinating because there's so much emphasis on that. I'm gonna ask you another breeding question myself. So, what's really popular is the doodles. So that's a blend of a poodle with other breeds because poodles are amazing athletic dogs. They're very, very smart. And the one thing I hear from some of my veterinarian friends is that doodles can be very challenging, though, because of the fact that they're always thinking.
Yeah,
And so a lot of people, any kind of doodle breed is very, very popular. And I
I love
have
working with them because they're really smart and they're already using their cognitive side of the brain. They
right, and
already
I
are
have
using it.
one of the older breeds of doodle, which they call a cockapoo, and I and so I can see that difference. But what can we do to save these dogs that people go, oh well, they're doodles, and I mean they're getting advice from some vets even, oh well, that's just how they are, or some groomers and such, and they're thinking, oh, I have to surrender this dog. What can you say to them about, hey, there's other options? Do you have anything to say for people like that who get kind of that advice? Oh, it's the breed, they're a little crazy. That's very discouraging for an owner.
It is, and it can really affect the dog as well, because the dog
I can feel
wants
it.
to use those skills and wants to think and learn, and it can really be hard on the dynamics and the relationship between the person and the dog can get frustrated as well. The person gets frustrated, the dog gets frustrated, and the behaviors can heighten, and that's what leads to surrender and euthanasia. And that is what really bothers me more than anything, because people deserve these options and dogs deserve these options. It should be more mainstream. I, I do have a lot of trainers asking me, and the first thing I say
Yes.
is, well, ask the people that you go to. Why don't they know it? Why aren't they, uh, contacting? I'm sure they want to learn it. I'm just entirely sure they want to learn it from me, but it certainly would help a lot of dogs a lot more quickly, because I can only help so many. And it's really not about me and my business at this point. It's about me spreading awareness on this. So I appreciate this opportunity, but sharing it on a larger scale is definitely my goal. I'd like to collaborate and get it out there.
You're
Find
tireless about collaborating, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have great skills in marketing or sales. People find me, but I do find it emotionally challenging when, you know, 78% of my clients have been told that they should surrender or euthanize. 98% of them have had 1 to 3 trainers before hiring me. And those trainers were good. They were certified, they're qualified, they're good. They're just using the wrong method for that dog at that time. And it can get, it needs to be out there, however that is done, whether that's done through, a celebrity who finds it interesting and wants to learn it or share it, or whether it's, platforms like this. I'm on lots and lots of platforms and sharing it. I'd like to teach it on a larger scale, talk to universities about it, talk to veterinarians, have more veterinarians be aware of what it is. And the ones that are interested in behavioral veterinarians, have them express an interest to the level of knowing it. It's very important that people that are influential over trainers and regular dog owners and media learn it. It's very important. It's important to me. It became important to me as a child, which I just learned recently. Something to do with my childhood. I don't know, but it's important to me that people feel comfortable bringing these dogs into their home and feel comfortable keeping their dogs because of my childhood. And like I said, I just learned this a few years ago. I never really made the connection. but we owe it to the dog. We owe it to the dogs. We do, because we're bringing them in to rescues and we're bringing them into shelters, and that behavioral euthanasia needs to stop.
Yes. In my opinion, it shouldn't be an option if people
No.
knew that there were other options. Because, like you said, people have been told by multiple trainers. And like with my dog, I heard that she had seen two of the best trainers that we heard of reputation wise, and that you could tell that there were some things that stuck with it, but there were some things that needed work on because, you know, the couple had to surrender. And clearly they wanted to make sure that she went to a good home. So I'm so thankful, whoever
I'm
you
so
are,
glad
because I have a
too.
great dog.
It's great when a dog lands.
Because, you
in
know,
the
we
right
were going at breeds, Billy. We were
neighborhood.
looking at,
You know, that
right.
is the
Yeah.
goal.
Let's
But we
say
do know
them.
how many, and the system justifies it. You know, they say, well, we did these tests, or the dog went here, or the dog gets 3 chances. And justifying euthanasia is completely unacceptable.
Right.
And dogs can, to me, if they haven't been exposed to CCBT, then we should not be euthanizing them. They should be at least exposed to it and see the progress, see the changes. Now, there's also, you know, there needs to be resources to do that. There needs to be space. There needs to be money, all sorts of other issues in there as well.
Right.
But if we're having fewer dogs being surrendered, and the dogs that are coming in from disadvantaged situations, if they're getting in homes more quickly and they're staying in these homes, then all of a sudden your resources and your space and your money is going to go up, right?
Yes.
So it's training isn't individual from anything else. It's my whole background is animal welfare, right? So it's not as though these are separate issues. They're the same issue, right? They all work
Yes.
together. If we're trying to solve this issue over there, we need solutions in the whole process, in the whole. But if we're having people that are perhaps more concerned about their reputation or ego, or having to say, you know, we need to learn this as well, you're just blocking the solutions to so many problems, not just that one dog being euthanized. It's not about justifying that. It's about thinking of it as a whole. It's not just one method for training dogs. It
Yes.
solves a lot of the problems that are occurring over many platforms in the animal world.
I really like how you said that. And you're hitting a tone. You're hitting, I hate to say a nerve, but with a lot of our viewers, in fact, the ones that have come in, of course, you know, Michelle Wilson, I love how she says, you know, Billie Groom, animal welfare, because you're worried about the welfare of the animals, and you say, look, there's solutions. I love how you said, hey, no animal should be euthanized, but if you're saying you've exhausted everything, then that means you have to also offer up cognitive behavior. Have you exposed the dogs to cognitive behavior? And of course, you know, Chris Langfield said that this is such great information, as so many people are choosing to adopt rescue dogs now, which is a good thing, of course. And now that I have a rescue dog, I totally agree. I'm a convert. And but Billy, why is it that rescue dogs are often misunderstood? Could you give us in a couple of sentences why you feel that so?
I think, and from scientific studies that I have looked into and studied, it's because they are trying to figure out how to integrate these dogs into our lives by using operant conditioning, and their tests are based on operant conditioning. Their studies are, and they're never going to learn that while they remain under that umbrella. You need to switch the way that you relate to them and work with them, and the mindset is changing. I hear it every day. That mindset is changing. They need the method.
Oh, I love it. And you have the method, and you're going to be teaching it on a grander scale. And
I
folks,
hope.
I
I'd
know
love
you're
to.
activating. You are, though. I know we want to grow, and you see yourself. You're noticing, folks, our viewers here, that Billy is a very determined woman, and she follows through with everything she's done. And Billy, we know you're doing that. Oh, Laura Ibarra just mentioned about your podcast, which, by the way, if you guys want to understand more of the science of cognitive behavioral therapy, especially canines, or learn about animal welfare, listen to Billie Groom's podcast, and you can catch her on Spotify, because I'm telling you, you can't not benefit from getting more knowledge. And indeed, you're a knowledge base for everyone, but you also are saving lives. I want to touch a little bit more before you go over to the big question about the work that you've done, the animal welfare work that you have been part of around the world. If you guys have traveled to developing countries or in other states, there are dogs that need of rescue. Billie, can you speak to how you've helped with that effort?
I've gone to Mexico a lot. I have connections with rescue organizations there, worked at spay and neuter clinics, and studied the dogs on the street, studied them over a period of time. I did that in Costa Rica as well, and their cognitive skills, their dynamics between them, the ability to bring them into homes and into rescue organizations. And a lot of the dogs I've worked with that have come to Canada have come from the wet markets, from the Korean meat market or the dog fighting circuit, the galgos from Spain. Now they're an interesting one because a lot of them were living in more of a kennel style situation, and they were taught to hunt for sport. So they're using their cognitive skills differently than a Mexican street dog. Mexican street dogs are learning how to survive, find food, keep food, whereas that was provided for the galgos. They were learning a sport. So when you asked earlier about difference in breed, it's not necessarily the breed, but the breed sometimes will define a little bit of their upbringing. But you can also, I've worked with galgos that didn't have that. They were just dumped as puppies and then got to Canada. So it really, it does. Sorry, I keep going all over the map, but
I'm with you.
But so, yeah, and dogs from the streets of India or all sorts of, I mean, it's a global problem. There's dogs everywhere.
Is your dog on the bed behind you, or is that a rescue dog? Is that your rescue dog kid? Is that
yeah, that one's from the streets of Mexico. That's Pancho Villa, and the one you might be hearing walking around is from Costa
Pancho
Rica.
Villa?
She's older shepherd type cross, and she's pretty much blind and pretty much deaf.
Oh,
Yeah.
You give me inspiration, because I have to tell you, when I was in Peru in the Sacred Valley, I fell in love with so many of the street dogs. And one thing about that culture, though, is they don't really molest the dogs as much. You can tell how a dog is in certain cultures. They feel like, oh, since nobody is taking care of them, that I can treat them poorly. But that's not what I witnessed in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And I did want to take them home, and I thought, oh no, what am I thinking? And here you are, Billie. You're doing that, and you're finding
And
homes.
some are fine on the street. You know,
Yeah, they are.
And they're clinics too. We'll bring them in and then put them back out. And you know, they're all different. But the ones I brought up were not going to make it. No.
Right. With like Pancho Villa is. Oh wow.
And his sister, I brought his sister up too. She's living with, well, she found her own home. It was with a client of mine from one of their other dogs that had been told that they had to euthanize that dog. It was actually a rescue organization that had tried a couple different fosters and trainers. And so that dog is doing fine, great. And then they ended up adopting his sister, who has the big pointy ears like that.
Wow, that's so cool. So now I want to segue into the big question, Billie, if you don't mind. If we ask all of our guests here, could we have the big question, please? So the question is, how do we make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological damage or disadvantage to anyone? And that question is by Buckminster Fuller. Billie, what's your take on that question?
I love this question. And like I said, I've listened to a lot of your shows, so I find everyone's answers really, really interesting and informative. For me, I have this saying, and I really like it, and I remind myself of it a lot. And I think it's appropriate here. don't think about making friends. Don't worry about making waves. Focus on making a difference. And if everybody did that and they thought inside themselves and really looked inside themselves, why am I making this decision? Am I just justifying? Am I making up criteria? Is there an underlying reason why I'm choosing to do something? And to really make those decisions based on the better interest and what's important and what really matters. And don't worry about, me as a, I make waves all the time because I'm not mainstream. And, I am known as an industry disruptor, and you can't worry about that. And as far as making friends, well, then you'd have to be mainstream. It's easy to be popular and to be mainstream. And I think that can really decrease learning and open-mindedness and finding what new solutions and helping if you're more worried just about making sure that you're popular or friends or having lots of followers. And then of course, if you just simply focus on your goal and what you know is right and what you know your skill sets are and what you can help, focus on making that difference.
Wow, that's beautiful. And quite frankly, I don't really see you as a disruptor in your industry. I see you as an
Thanks.
industry bridge maker, because there are clearly gaps in the industry of animal welfare, of animal training, and we need to really insert more Billie Grooms out there. And I can see why you're saying, hey, come on, follow me. I want to help other people, learn what I do so I can work with them. And I see a program coming down the pipelines in my vision of you licensing and teaching people how to do this so that you can make a bigger impact here, Billie.
Wow.
You can correct me if I'm wrong
No,
here,
that would
but
be fantastic.
I just see that because the need for what you're doing is fantastic. You've established yourself so well because you learned about the different sciences of there. And I want to really point this out, folks, because a lot of people there's motivational speakers. Or Tony Robbins even talks about the first thing he does when he wants to let the crowd know that he knows what he's doing, even though he didn't go to college to learn what he's doing. He rattles off all the different theories of thought and psychology that one could possibly learn. And then from there says, okay, now that I know this, do I have your attention? Okay, now I'm going to speak to you about the experiential part. And Billie, for this part of the interview of you showing about the experiential part of what can happen and the changes. And I can certainly tell that you do have a really good privacy clause, because not once could I crack an actual example with some of your clients, because I know that privacy is so important to you.
Well, it's also because that's the beauty of CBT, right?
Really?
If I
Okay.
could just give a quick fix coffee shop answer, or when your dog does this, do this, when your dog does this, do that, I would just be doing operant conditioning. So it's not so much that
Yeah.
I don't want to, it's also just how it's inherently in CBT that, yes, I could say, do this,
Mhm.
but then it would be like a nutritionist telling you to eat carrots.
Right. And
Like,
so there
it
may,
kind of, it's like, yeah, then what?
or what if you're allergic to carrots? What are you
Yeah,
going to do after that?
exactly. Or you can't
Right.
get them where you live, or it's not really going to fix your problem. Yes, it's better to eat carrots, but maybe that's not directly related. And you
Yeah.
need the feedback, and that's why it's so beautiful. That is what is so beautiful. So I'm just not going to undermine it by,
So yeah, we call those the
yeah,
cookie cutter programs. You're
yeah,
not going to do a cookie cutter,
you
and there's
can't
enough out
do
there. But what I
if you
love
just,
about you is that you have this where you're like, let's see where your dog's at, let's see where their mind's at, let's see how we can work with them, let's see how we can work with you as
yeah,
the people working with them. And then let's have these breakthroughs. And like you said these changes, actually these shifts happen quickly. And then from there, you
yes,
just have to work with it. And that's what I really want to get across to our viewers. Our viewers are
yes.
so interested in what you're thinking.
It's
It's
it
just,
is. It's a formula that I've created. So if I were to teach it on a larger scale, it would be a long, just like a course for operant conditioning for any trainers now. Those are 6 to 8 months. Some of them are 2 years. But you would learn, these are the questions that you ask. And so whether people are doing it with their own dog or whether they're doing it as a trainer for their clients, you know, it's these are the questions to ask. This is when this question is answered. If they answer this, it's kind of like one of those books I had when I was a
Choose
kid.
your own adventure.
Yeah, yes,
I remember
exactly.
those. Yes,
If you want little Susie to go here, turn to page 75. But it
right.
makes sense when you're doing it. That's why I took some time aside
Mhm.
to actually formulate what I was doing and think about what I was doing and why it was working and what I was doing. Because at some point it's what am I doing? So it had to become a formula. So this is why I can easily, my clients aren't learning how to train everybody's dog. They're not learning how to use CCBT for everybody's dog. They're learning specifically for their own. But if I were to teach it on a large scale, that's where the formula comes in.
And this, folks, is why I can't get over Billie Groom. Billie, I can't get over the type of work you do. It's so important. It's so important to humanity. Well, we already did an intro about what Mahatma Gandhi said about the new techniques that are coming out. It's been said also by some sage person that you can judge a culture by the way it treats its animals. So thank
Yes.
you for those rescuing efforts that you do and educating us. Thank you so much for
Thank
building
you.
that bridge that clearly is a gap when it comes to especially dog behavior, but animal behavior. And we just want to thank you so much for coming on to Ignite Your Essence. Now, you do have a clothing line that speaks to what people think about caring for animals. Is that correct?
Yes, it's just launched 2 days ago, actually. It's called,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's brand new, but I think, well, for one, it's part of the money, 2% from each piece goes to animal welfare. But it also allows people to, it's creative, it's sayings, it's creative. It's called Backbone dash design with a capital D, capital Z, YNE. But that's because I think Backbone design was actually taken.
Okay.
So it's
That's brilliant. It gives us the backbone to be able
yes,
to say these things as we work. Because a lot of times we would love to educate people like you do, but a lot of times we don't have the words for it, or we would love people to start thinking in the way of the care for how a dog thinks so that you don't have to euthanize. And so we can get these clothing and say, hey, have you thought of
well,
this?
the clothing isn't so much about the behavioral rehab. A lot of it is to do with banning trophy hunting or bullfighting.
Okay. Yeah, the things that cause
Things,
damage.
yeah, things that animal welfare more so, which is where my heart lies. And I even feel animal welfare would benefit from learning my program and sharing my program, because that's really what it's all about. That is really what it's all about. So for me, that's what that clothing line is for. So it's not just dogs. It's also promoting peace.
I love it. Well, they say that if you do things that are close to your heart and you share them, there you go. Oh, and Lado Barra says, and thanks so much for a great job and commitment to my beloved
Aw,
Mexico. And you certainly are doing an amazing job in changing cultures down there as
thank you.
well. Billie, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Don't
you
go
so much.
away. I just want to speak to the audience a little bit, and then I'm going to close you out with a final thought.
Thank you.
So, folks, as we have spoken with Billie Groom, who is the Canine Cognitive Behavioral Therapist, the CCBT program. If you're just joining us here, check us out in the replays, because she says some amazing things about how this does bridge the gap of why people have to put to sleep dogs, and how you may not have to. At least give them a chance. Give them this cognitive behavioral therapy, because it does change in an instant if you're getting the right knowledge and the right techniques for where your dog is at. And it's so important because it's enriching in our lives to live in harmony and to have those around us happy, including our furry kids, like our dogs. And that's why, folks, I want to remind you again that may you always have a reason to smile. Look for that perspective, look for those solutions, because if you do, life does indeed get better no matter what you're going through. And with that, I'd like to bring up Billie Groom. Billie, I'd love you to please gift our audience with a final thought. Billie, the floor is yours.
You can make a difference. Anyone can make a difference, and research and look into, what is important to you and to your options. And if you're not comfortable following mainstream, you're not comfortable with what you're hearing or learning, go find what works for you and what you can do and how you can share and make a difference.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And thank you for that gift, Billie. And thank you for coming on Ignite Your Essence. I certainly hope that you will be joining us again. I know that Michelle Wilson, who has our Thursday shows every Thursday at 11, would love to delve in deeper with what you had to say. In fact, she got to ask a few questions here when we had our technical difficulty. As you know, at Ignite Your Essence, we always want to amplify the good in all. And thank you, Billie,
Thank
for
you
all the
so
good
much.
you do. And so with that, folks, we want to wish you a goodbye, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day or night in our global world. Bye.